In today's video, I'm going to show you how to build this app, and it's basically a purchase request app that handles contracts and then just purchase card type stuff. And we're going to go ahead and explain how you can create your business process flows in here, as well as give specific views based off of what type of a request it is. For example, this is a supply request, so we're getting an item list and we've got attachments. And if we go back over here, and we look at a contract, we're seeing contract details and we're seeing the request attachments, but we're not seeing the purchase items. And then if we come over here and we look at just a shipping type request, we're seeing the shipping details and the package specific information, as well as the request attachments here. And again, all of our business process flows are adjusting with each of those as well. And if we just go back to the standard and hit the new, we're seeing that we only have this to start with. And it comes up with the business process flow, and it'll adjust based off of the settings of this app. So in terms of the business process flow, this is what we're going to build as part of this. This is actually the final version. The version I'll do in the video is a little bit different than this, but this is what the final product is going to look like for the business process flow. And I will forget to talk about security roles, but you do want to take a look at your security roles as part of this also. And then we're also going to talk about business rules, and we're going to build a couple of different business rules in here for some of the functionality that we're going to put in here. And one of the big pieces is we're going to talk about how to use a JavaScript plugin here to enable some of the functionality inside of this. So we're going to build this also, or at least explain how this works. And again, the code for this will be in the description if you want to take a look at that or use that in your own work. That's just a few of the things we're going to cover as part of this app design. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, let's go to solutions and create a new solution. And we'll go ahead and call this acquisition services and coordination. And for our publisher, we'll go ahead and select our Office Solutions Pro. And let's go ahead and hit the create button here. And let's go jump right into tables. And I think we're going to start with some of the lookup tables. Now for this first table, let's go ahead and add our purchase type. And it's going to be a lookup, so we don't need it to be user or team. We'll just go with an organization table for this one. And I always turn on leverage to quick create. We may not use that, but at least we'll have it enabled automatically for us. And we can come back and make adjustments to most of this later on if we need to make adjustments. Let's hit save. Now, let's go ahead and adjust this. I always leave it as the default of a name. It just makes it a little bit easier when you're working with Power Automate or some of the other things you might use it for. If the name is the primary name across all of your tables. But let's go ahead and change this to purchase type. And then we'll go ahead and hit save. And we'll go ahead and put this in the beginning here. And for our purchase types, we're just going to add 2 for this. You can add as many as you want, but we're just going to put purchase card. And then we're going to put contract. For the most part, just about everything falls into either a purchase card or contract option. And you could make a breakdown between purchase card for large purchases versus smaller purchases based off maybe a dollar amount. Again, the sky's the limit on how you set this up. This just makes sense for me. All right, so that's our first table. Let's go ahead and add another table. And again, this is going to be another lookup table. And for this one, we're going to say it is request type. And again, we'll do the same thing. Since it's a lookup, we don't need it to be a user or team. And then we'll go ahead and turn this on here. And then again, we'll change our name here. So let's go ahead and edit this column. And this is going to be request type. And then we'll hit save. And let's go ahead and add another column here. And this will be our purchase type, and this will be a lookup column to our purchase type table. And we're going to make this one a required field, and we'll go ahead and hit save. All right, let's put this in the beginning here, and we'll add a couple in here just to get things started. So for purchase card, a couple of the options might be supplies, pretty common one. Maybe you call it office supplies, or maybe we'll call it IT supplies. You might have a couple different options for each of these in there. We'll go with just kind of supplies to keep it simple. And then shipping, because that's always something you have to pay for, is the shipping. And then we'll go for a contract example. And for this one, let's go ahead and go with services. A lot of times your services are contracted out. So we'll put contract here, and then maybe training development might be a good option. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. A lot of times your training development, you contract that out also. All right, so we got two options there for this. Let's go back in tables, and now we're going to create another table. And this one again, we'll do an organization, and this will be a lookup as well. So we're going to have a organization here, and then turn on our leverage quick there and hit the save. All right, let's go ahead and move this to this side, and then we're going to rename this. So we'll call this organization, and we'll hit save. And we'll go ahead and put a couple of examples in here. Maybe it's the IT department, maybe it's the executive team. And again, your organization names might be completely different. If you're in the federal government, it's probably some sort of 7 or 8 alphanumeric letters that you've got in there. But you could also, in this table, create that. And then you could have like a description of that organization also if you wanted to do it. But for this, we're just going to keep it simple here. Maybe you have a communications department. And maybe you've got some sort of purchasing department. I don't know, it could be anything. These are just kind of for demonstration purposes when we get into the actual app and using it. I think we're pretty good here. So let's go back to our tables and we'll add another table. And this one's going to be attachments. Now we don't actually have everything that we're going to need for attachments. In this case, we'll turn on our leverage quick create form and hit save. All right, so we'll go ahead and move this again to the beginning there. Now, in the case of the name field, we're actually going to update this using probably a Power Automate or maybe some JavaScript. But a lot of times you could do one of two things. You can make this just like an ID, but it's kind of useless. Or you could make it into maybe like the file name or something like that. So you've got a couple different options. In a Canvas app, this is actually much, much easier to update with the name of the file than it is with the model-driven app. Let's go ahead and hit add here. And this one's just going to be our request attachment. We'll select a file for this one and hit save. And let's go ahead and just move this over here, keep things nice and clean and organized. Now we'll have to do a lookup to the request table once we create that to kind of finish this up. Now there are a couple other tables we're going to have to create, but let's go ahead and create the table for our actual request. So let's do this, because the rest of the tables are going to need to reference this anyway, so it's probably a good time to build this. And we'll just call it acquisition requests. And that name will kind of cover purchase card and your contract type stuff, but maybe you have a different name in mind. And let's go ahead and down here, and again, turn on our leverage quick create, so we don't have to come back here and do that again later. And we'll hit save. All right, let's go ahead and add some fields here. The first one's going to be our request ID. And for this one, it's just going to be an auto number. So we'll select auto number. And what prefix for this would just be acquisition request, and I typically set this to 5 digits. And then you can change this if you want to. If you don't want to start at 1,000, maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. You can do pretty much whatever you want here, or you can make it a much longer number also. It will grow anyway, so it's not essential that you make it longer right off the bat because it will get bigger over time. But let's go ahead and hit save. And then let's go ahead and add the next one. Now this is going to be our purchase type, and that'll be a lookup that we created for that table. So let's go to our purchase type table and hit save. And let's go ahead and add our request type. And again, that'll be a lookup and hit save. And then let's go ahead and add another lookup here. And this one's going to be our requester. Now, you could just leave this as the created by column if you don't need to have a requester specifically. A lot of times people put them in there and they put them in there for other people. So that's kind of why I go with the requester column, but you could also just kind of go by the created by as the requester and bypass creating this column entirely. And we're going to do a lookup. And for this one, we're going to go to the users table. So let's select that and hit save. All right, let's go ahead and add another column here. And this will be our organization supported. And this will be a lookup to our organization table. And let's hit save. And then we'll go ahead and add another one for our organization funding. And again, that'll be a lookup to our organization table. And hit save. Now let's go ahead and add a need by date. And that'll be a date column. We'll do date only for this. And hit save. All right, let's go ahead and add a justification column. And for this one, it's going to be text, but we want to have multiple lines of text. And you could do rich text if you wanted to. Let's go ahead and hit save. We may need to adjust the text length on that later, but I think the default is probably sufficient, but that might be something we have to adjust in the future. Now let's go ahead and select a priority. And for this one, we'll just make it a choice column. Priority typically doesn't change later on. Again, I usually use the lookups for things that are more likely to change. There's going to be new organizations, organizational renames, organizational restructures. All of those things will probably result in some changes to that particular table. Priority typically doesn't change much. We're going to just go with our typed in options here. So for priority, let's try routine, and we'll say routine is 30 plus days. And then we'll add a probably need to spell that correctly. And then we got our standard. And for that, we'll go with 15 to 30 days. And then we'll add another choice here for expedited. And that'll be 7 to 14 days. Again, you can come up with whatever makes the most sense to you. This makes sense to me. And then we'll do our critical. And for that, we'll say less than 7 days. Okay, I think that works like that. And for our default, we'll just leave that blank. The user can select what makes the most sense. And let's go ahead and hit save. And then let's go ahead and add another column. And sometimes a request is linked to a program. So let's go ahead and put a question in there for supporting existing program. Let's call it that instead. So essentially the user can put in there which program it's being associated with, though if there's a kind of like a tracking history. Now you might want to do is if you had access to program tables, you could essentially put a lookup to that particular program and they could actually link it that way. For this one, we're just going to put it as a text field and hit save. All right, let's go ahead and add another column. And for this one, we're going to say sensitivity. And it's going to be a choice column for this one. And we're going to type these in. Then we're not going to use these across the environment. So we'll call this one public, internal. And then for another one, we'll call it restricted, procurement, sensitive. And we'll give an option for restricted CUI, PI. And then we'll do another restricted action for vendor. All right, let's add one more here for restricted. And we'll say legal or privileged. And for this one, let's go ahead and set it for public internal as the default. And we'll hit save. Now we'll add another yes, no column in this case, restricted. And this one is going to be a yes, no, and hit save. All right, let's add another column here for sensitivity justification. And for this one, we'll go ahead and make it plain text multi-line, and we're going to hit save here. All right, let's go ahead and add another column, and we'll go ahead and call this one the acquisition request status. And it's going to be a choice column. And for this one, we're going to use a global choice, but we need to create it. So let's go ahead and call that acquisition request status. You might be wondering, why am I making it a global choice? We're actually going to put this information in two places. So it's going to be in this table here, but we're going to have a standalone reference table that's going to include all the different status changes in chronological order, so we can see the process unfold if we need to. All right, let's go ahead and put in submitted. And for this one, we're going to change colors also. And for this one, let's go with A7D3F3, kind of a light blue. And we'll add another choice here, and that'll be assigned. All right, so now we have our colors. And so when we're looking at this in the list view, we'll see these colors, hopefully. And we'll go ahead and hit save. That'll offer that visual indicator of what the status is. It's kind of a lot of statuses to assign colors to, but I think it still works. And let's go ahead and select our status. And for our default, we're going to go with submitted. Every time the request is inputted for the first time, it'll always be submitted for the beginning. So that's a good start place for this. And let's hit save. All right, so then we want to have some notes about the status. That way we can provide any kind of amplifying information about what's going on with that. Acquisition request status notes. And we'll make this a multi-line. I think the default for that's probably sufficient, 2000. Yeah, I think that'll work. Let's hit save. All right, so now we want to take a look at our fields related to contract. So if they select contract, what are the fields going to be for that situation? So let's go ahead and add a contract type. And this will be a choice column. And we don't need to do this anywhere else, so we're just going to use the built-in here. And we'll say new, renewal, an extension, modification, recompete, option for exercise, and we've got our bridging action. And let's see what else, supplemental funding. And then we'll just give a catch-all for other. I'm sure there's some other stuff that I'm forgetting here, and we could always come back in here and add those also. So let's hit save here. And then we want to talk about period of performance. So we'll do contract start date. And that's probably going to be an estimate, but we'll just kind of leave it as it is right there. Maybe we change it later. That'll be a date only. And let's hit save. And then we're going to do a contract end date. That'll cover our period of performance. We might add estimated in here down the road, but we'll just keep it like this. And then let's go ahead and add an estimated value. And we'll do this one as a currency and hit save. All right, let's go ahead and add sole source. Now this will just be a yes, no choice. And we'll hit save. Nothing to be aware of with these choice columns is it's always got to be yes or no. So even if they don't select contract, you're going to get a value. So no is probably best as the default there. And let's go ahead and do a sole source justification. And we'll make that a lengthy text also. Again, 2000 characters I think is sufficient to start with, and then we can always modify it up if we need to. All right, we got a lot of the information that we need for the contract. We also need the vendor information, but we're going to do that through a lookup tables. So we'll do that in a few minutes here. Now, what about for shipping? So let's say they select the shipping is what they're trying to do. Then we need some shipping information. So we need the from contact. So basically this is who is shipping the items. And for this, it'll be a lookup. And we use the user table. Well, let's call it the from POC, make it a little simpler. And there we go. And let's go ahead and add a to POC. And in this case, it's going to be a text field because it could be somebody outside your organization. So let's go ahead and hit save. And then let's go ahead and add the to org. And that'll be, again, just a text field. And then we'll go ahead and add the to address. And then let's go here, and then we can select multiple lines of text for this one. And we don't need 2000 characters, so we can actually just make this a little bit smaller. We'll probably just make it 1,000. That way we've got a little bit of a buffer. Oops, 1,000. And we hit save here. And then we need to know information about how fast does it need to get there. So let's call it service level. And for this one, we'll make it a choice. And we'll just use this option here. I'm not going to put this in more than one place. So overnight, 2-day, you ground, maybe do international priority. And again, you could make this basically a list of every possible option. We're just going to go with these to go with. And then let's go ahead and hit save. And signature required. And that'll just be a yes, no choice. And hit save. All right, I think that gives us everything that we need for right now. We may come back here and add some columns that I might have missed. But I think we're pretty good there. All right, now let's go ahead and create another table, and this will be a lookup table. So we'll add a table, advanced properties, and this is going to be our vendor. And for this one, again, it could be just an organization table. And we'll do that leveraged quick create, and we'll hit save. All right, let's go ahead and change the name of this, and this will just be vendor name, and hit save. And let's go ahead and add a URL. Maybe they've got a storefront, so they can add that in here. We've got a special field for URLs. Let's hit save. And then we'll add a column for vendor phone. And that'll be a phone number option. We'll hit save. And then we'll add vendor email. In case we work with somebody specifically, we can include that information in here. And hit save. And then we've got our vendor address. So let's go ahead and add vendor address. And that'll be a large text field. And then obviously we need to go to our acquisition request and add a lookup to this. So we'll add vendor, and that'll be a lookup to our vendor table. And hit save. And then we'll go ahead and add our attachments lookup. All right, let's hit the acquisition request. That'll be a lookup to our acquisition request table. And we'll hit save. Perfect. Now we do want to take a look at our relationships for this one. And we're going to refresh our screen quick because otherwise we're going to get an error. And let's select our acquisition request. And for this one, we want it to be a parental. And we'll hit done. That way, if we delete our acquisition request, it'll delete the attachments associated with it as well. All right, let's go back to our table list here. All right, let's go ahead and add our status table. And let's go ahead down here. And we'll turn on our quick create, although we'll probably never use it for this particular table anyway, and hit save. Now for this table, we're really only going to be showing the statuses as they change. So I think we can go ahead and change this to an auto number, and we'll be fine with that. And we'll say acquisition status. And again, we'll do a 5, and we'll go ahead and start this one at 4. All right, I think that works. And we can always come back in here and change this later if we want to. All right, let's go ahead and add another column. And this one will be the acquisition request status. And that'll be, again, a choice. And it'll be our column that we created. And all right, that looks good. Then we'll go ahead and add our acquisition request status notes. And again, that'll just kind of mirror what we set up in the other table. So it'll be a plain text, and we'll hit save. And then we'll go ahead and add status updated by, and this will just be a user column. So we'll do a lookup, and user. And one more lookup to the acquisition request. And that'll link it to the request that's been created. All right, so let's put this over here. We have our status, our notes, and who did the update. And that's essentially what we need. Let's go ahead and adjust our relationships again. And let's refresh our page so we don't get the error. All right, and select this, and we'll make this a parental again, and hit done. All right, let's go back to our tables again. All right, let's go ahead and create another table. And this will be our purchase items. So it's basically a table of all the different items. And again, we'll do our leverage quick create and hit save. All right, let's go ahead and change our name column, and we'll call this one just the item name. And let's go ahead and hit save. And then let's add another column for item type. And this one will just be a choice column. And you can obviously add a lot more options. We're just going to keep this pretty simple and say supplies. And then we'll say equipment. And we're going to hit save. And then we'll do another lookup, and this will be to a vendor. And we'll hit save. Now our vendor has a URL, but that's more for the business or the company. In this case, we're going to say item URL. For example, if you're buying from Amazon, then it would be the actual URL for the item to make it a little bit easier for the person to find what you're looking for, so they can confirm that it's an authorized purchase or that it's going to be the right price and all that kind of stuff. Let's just actually do the purchase. And let's go ahead and, oh, I did forget to check. Yeah, a lot of times the character length isn't long enough for a URL. We'll actually go with 2,000 characters just to be safe. And I forgot to do that with the other URL, so I'll have to go back and make that update as well. So we'll hit save here. And then we'll hit add here. And we'll say quantity. And that'll be a number, a whole number. And that'll be, we'll hit save for this. All right, let's go ahead and add another column here. And for this, we'll say, and this will be a choice. And this is one of those things that doesn't change very often. So we'll go with each. And then we'll go with box. And I'm not going to necessarily do them all, but I'll do a lot of the common ones here. And we'll do a pack. And then we'll do a case. And then we'll do a set and a kit and a roll and a bundle. I think that's sufficient. I think that's the majority of them actually, but there probably are some other ones I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. And hit save. Let's go ahead and add our unit price. And for this one, a lot of times you would use currency. But if you use currency, it's not supported as a formula field. You'd have to use Power Automate or a plugin to do. In this case, because I'm building this for essentially the US dollar, I don't think it really matters that I have currency. If you're doing multiple currencies, then you would want to use the currency because it'll be a little bit easier to work with. But in this case, we're just going to go with a decimal number. And that'll be sufficient for us. And let's adjust our advanced options here. We're never going to have a number below 0. So we can go ahead and get rid of that. And then yes, 2 decimal places, and that looks good. So let's hit save. And then let's go ahead and add our total price now, which will be a calculated field. So we'll select a formula, and then we'll say quantity times unit price. Oh, I guess it helps if I use the right symbol here. There we go. Now we hit save. And let's go ahead and add a notes column. And again, that'll be a multiple lines of text. So we'll do plain text here and hit save. All right, so that's pretty much it for our items. The only thing we need to do now is add our lookup to our request. So let's go ahead and add our acquisition request and lookup and hit save. And then we'll just adjust our relationship also. So let's go to the relationships. And then again, we'll go ahead and refresh our page. All right, let's select the acquisition. And this again will be a parental relationship. So we'll hit done here. That way when the request is deleted, it'll delete all the associated metadata with it. All right, let's go back to our tables. And we've got one more table to add. And let's go ahead and do that. Now this is going to be our package details for shipping. And we'll go ahead and leverage this again and hit save. And then we'll go ahead and edit this. And we'll go ahead and call this package description and hit save. Then we'll add a length, width, height field, and that'll just be a single field of text and hit save. And let's go ahead and add a weight field. And this time we'll say it's pounds. And again, we'll leave it as a single line of text in this case because maybe it's like an ounce or 2 ounces and they want to write that in there and specify, but we're going to specifically ask for pounds. But there's probably going to be some unique scenario out there where it's only a couple of ounces, maybe it's a letter or a small package of some sort. So we'll leave it as a text field and hit save. And let's go ahead and add another field here for the insured value. And for this one, we'll make it a currency field and hit save. And let's go ahead and add a contents description. And we'll make that a multiple line of text again. They shouldn't need 2,000 characters, so we'll just drop this to 500 and hit save. Then we'll add hazmat. That'll just be a yes or no. And we'll hit save. And then we'll go ahead and add a lithium battery. And that'll be, again, a choice of yes, no. And hit save. And then we'll add our lookup for the acquisition request. And hit save. All right, let's go and adjust our relationship for this. And again, we'll refresh our page. And let's go ahead and adjust that. And again, we'll make it a parental relationship and hit done. All right, let's look at our tables again. All right, let's go ahead and create one more table. And this is going to be for our funding information. So we'll call it funding lines. And let's go ahead and hit save. All right, let's go ahead and change the name of this. And we'll call this the LOA. And this is just going to be a text field. And it basically can just copy and paste your line of accounting in here. And that would be sufficient for it. You could also put the individual components in here if you wanted to put, like, say, the project, the fund org, the task, and cost center, and all that kind of information, whatever makes up your line of accounting information. You could add individual fields for each one of those if that's your preference. And then you could also just take that information and build the line of accounting string. But we're just going to have the line of accounting string here. And then let's go ahead and add another column for the amount authorized. And that'll be a currency. And we'll hit save here. And again, we'll go ahead and add some notes here. And we'll just say LOA notes. And we'll make this plain text, multi-line. All right, so we've got our LOA, our amount, and our LOA notes. Now we have to have our lookup to our acquisition request. That'll keep it linked to the actual request. And we'll hit save. All right, that looks good. Let's go ahead and adjust our relationship right away. All right, so let's click on acquisition request. And again, we'll make this a parental relationship. All right, let's go back to our tables. Now, one other table column that I forgot to add. All right, so we're going to add 2 more columns here. And one of them is going to be the assigned to. Now, this might be whoever is actually assigned to kind of work through the request from start to finish. And again, this will be a lookup. So we'll do the user table for that. And let's hit save. Now, what you could do for the assign to is you could actually create a table. For example, maybe you have a list of specific people that you want to be able to choose from. You could use that list for assigning, and then you'd only get the options that you have in that list instead of everybody that's in the users table. And to demonstrate that, we're going to do that with the budget analyst. So we're going to go back to tables, and we're going to create a new list. And this one's going to be our budget analyst. And again, we'll leverage our quick create here, and then we'll hit save. Now for this one, let's go ahead and add a column, and this will be budget analyst. And then we're going to do a lookup to the users table, and we'll hit save. Now we'll add one more column, and this one will be supported organization. Maybe the budget analyst only supports certain organizations, and there's a budget analyst for each organization. So this would allow you to add additional metadata for the user beyond what you can do with the users table without doing some customizations and potentially running some issues if you're moving between environments. Let's go ahead and do a lookup to our organization table and hit save. Now what we're going to do with the name column is we're going to create an automation that puts the name of the budget analyst in here. So the name for this record will always be associated with the name of the person. We'll do that here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and go back to our acquisition requests and then add a column for our budget analyst. And that'll be a lookup to our budget analyst table. And let's hit save. Now, so if we didn't do the Power Automate where we update the name field of the budget analyst table, when we do the lookup, it would essentially be blank for that column. And that's kind of what we're fixing when we create those Power Automates. Now let's create another column here. And we'll say LOA assign. And this will just be a yes or no. And we'll hit save. All right, let's go do some of the automations that we're going to need for supporting this app. So let's go here and we'll do an automation and a Cloudflow automated. And I always just hit skip. And our trigger is going to be when a row is added or modified. And we'll do added or modified. And our table is going to be our budget analysts. And scope will be organization. And our select columns here is going to be OSP underscore budget analyst. And our new step is going to be to Microsoft Dataverse. And we're going to get a row ID. And the table for this one is going to be the users table. So let's go find our users, and it will be the budget analyst value. And let's rename this user details. Essentially, that's all we're doing with this step is getting the user's information. And then we're going to do an update. Now that we've got the user's information, we're going to update row. And the table is going to be our budget analyst table. And the row ID is going to be our trigger, budget analyst. And the name column is what we're going to update. And we're going to look at our full name, put it in that field there. Let's go ahead and rename this and hit save. All right, let's rename this. I forgot to do that. So this would be update. I'm going to name budget analyst table and then save again. All right, let's go test this. So we'll go back to our budget analyst table and we're going to add somebody. So we'll say me and we'll go with executive team. All right. Oh, there's a problem. So we need to make sure this is not a required field in order for this to work. So let's go ahead and turn this off and make that optional. Let's refresh. Now let's try this again. So we'll do Travis and we'll be the executive team. And let's go ahead and refresh the page and see if our automation worked. All right, it worked. So it effectively did exactly what we wanted to, but we want to make sure it's not going to do an infinite loop. So let's go back and check our Power Automate to see if it did this over and over and over again into an infinite loop. All right, and as we can see here, it did not do an infinite loop. And if I refresh, it did exactly like it's supposed to. So basically, it's only going to run when the budget analyst changes. So if I change executive or if I change the organization, it's not going to change anything. So it worked exactly as we expected. Let's go back to our cloud flows again. All right, let's go ahead and do an automation for updating our main table. And we'll do an automated one here. Hit skip. And then let's go with the Dataverse again. And again, it'll be row added or modified. So we'll select added or modified here. And it'll be our acquisition request. And our scope will be organization, because we want this to happen all the time. Now, our select columns is interesting. We're going to come back to this in a second, because we want to make sure that we put in the right information so that if there are changes, that we don't get an infinite loop, as we've said before. So let's go ahead and add a new step here. And for this one, let's go ahead and we're going to get row by ID. And for this one, we're going to go to the users table. And for this, it's going to be the requester. So we got our requester value here. And this is, rename this to user details. And then let's add a new step here. And Microsoft Dataverse. And let's go ahead and add our update row. So we can take a look at how we're going to set this up. So again, it'll be our acquisitions requests. And then we use our trigger. And it'll be this one. Now the name field is what we're trying to update. And what do we want to put in here? Let's go ahead and find our request ID. So that'll be the start. And then we'll go ahead and add a hyphen here. And then we'll go ahead and put our purchase type value in here, just as a placeholder for right now. And then we want to have our username. So we'll type in full name. And then maybe the date also. So this would be our created. Now, we're not going to use all of these the way they are right now. We're just kind of putting them in there as a placeholder. So this is essentially what we're going to put as our format for our name field here. So we want the ID. There's nothing wrong with this. Then we want the purchase type. But purchase type is a lookup. So we actually need to do something very similar to what we did here to get the user's detail to get this information here. And then we're going to do the full name. And we got that already from our lookup. And then we need the created on. But when we use created on, we actually have to format this, or we're going to get a whole bunch of extra information that we don't necessarily want to have. So we are going to need to do some formatting for this. Let's go ahead and add our other option here to get the lookup. So we'll do another get. And for this one, it is the purchase types. And the row ID, if we come over here, is going to be our purchase type value. So that'll get us all the information associated with the purchase types. So let's go ahead and rename this. All right, now we can come back here. Let's get rid of this and then come back over here to the purchase type. And we want this column here, which is the actual name of the purchase type. So we'll pull that in there. Otherwise, we'd get the GUID or the unique identifier for purchase type, and that would be what there. So we get this long string of numbers and letters. Same thing with the username. If you don't take this approach for getting the information, you essentially end up getting the GUID for it, and it's kind of useless. Now for created on, we need to format this. Let's go ahead and remove this, and let's go to our expression. Now for our expression, what we want to do is format date time, and then we'll put in the trigger outputs, and then we're going to put in this, and then we want the body's information. So let's go ahead and body, and in this case, it's the created on field. And then we'll go ahead and put a comma, And then what is the format that we're looking for? Well, we want one, probably year, and then month and day. I think will work pretty good for this. And then we just close that off. All right, let's go ahead and just do a quick once over, make sure that we got our syntax correct. So far, everything looks good. All right, let's hit OK. And then we should have our request ID, a dash, purchase type, full name, and the date. That's pretty good for our unique identifier for this, as far as a name column. And the benefit of doing this is we get a whole bunch of information in one column. So we get the request ID, if you like using ID information. You get what kind of a purchase is it? Is it going to be a contract, or is it going to be some sort of a purchase card item? Who did the request? And then you get the date of it. So you get a ton of good information instead of a single column. Let's go ahead and rename this. And then we'll say update primary name field. All right, let's go ahead and change this. And we'll say update primary name of acquisition request table. All right, now we have to go back and take a look at this. So what columns do we want to trigger a change here? So we want the OSP purchase type, and then we also want the OSP requester, and request ID is an auto number, and created on is a fixed point. So we're pretty good with that. So these will essentially allow for a trigger, and if it's not one of these fields, then it's not going to trigger it again. So we'll go ahead and hit save. All right, let's go ahead and hit the back button here, and then we'll add another flow. And this again will be automated, and I'll skip this. My preference is always just kind of start from the beginning so I can pick the trigger and everything. I know there's probably a decent template that I could use, but I generally just like to kind of build the entire thing from scratch. And again, it'll be added or modified, and it's going to be for our primary table that we're looking at for this. And again, we'll do scope towards the end. Let's go ahead and add a new step, and let's go ahead and get our user's information. So again, our table is going to be users, and our row ID is going to be the modified by value. So essentially, when somebody goes in here and updates it, the modified by should be the information that we need. All right, let's go ahead and rename this. And it's the modified by user details. And then let's go ahead and add a new step here. And again, we're going to do a get, and it's going to be actually our row that was modified. So we're going to go to our acquisition requests, and the row ID is going to be the acquisition requests. This happens to be just a little bit easier approach for getting the OData ID. So that's why I use this. You can actually do this a completely different way for OData IDs, but I think this is a little bit easier for most people to do. And we'll say get request details. And let's go ahead and add a new step. Now our final goal is to create a row. So let's go ahead and add a new row. And we're going to add it to our status histories table. And let's see here. So we want to do the acquisition request. So this is like the lookup column basically. So let's look for OData. And we're looking for this to do that update. And then for our status, let's go down and do custom. And we want to use dynamic content. So we'll go ahead and pull our status. And we'll use our trigger for this status. And then we'll use our notes. Again, we'll use our trigger for this. So let's go back down to the bottom here. And then we want to do our updated by. And again, we're looking for OData for this lookup. And it will be our user data right here. So now we've got our request lookup, and we've got our status. We've got the notes. Name was an auto ID, so we don't have to worry about that one here. And we do need to update we made the change. So I think we've got everything that we need. Let's go ahead and rename this. And we'll go ahead and call this update status history table. And then we'll do the same up here. And we'll hit save. Now, one other change we have to make is we have to go back here and we put organization for the scope, but we do need to select columns to avoid that infinite loop. And really the two columns, or maybe even just the one column that really matters for this is the status column and the notes. Those are really the only two columns that we're kind of paying attention to, because you could keep the status the same, but update the notes. So we kind of need to keep both of these columns being tracked for changes. So let's go ahead and add the first one, which is our status. And then our second one is the notes. So anytime that a change happens in these columns, it's going to trigger this flow. All right, let's save one more time. And I think everything's looking good. All right, let's go ahead and hit the back button here. So we've got our flows, and that's essentially all the flows that we need. For attachments, I decided to change our approach a little bit. So I went and changed this a little bit in the attachments area. Instead of have the name field be just kind of like the name of the file, I went with the description so we could add a little bit more information about what file. Now the user might just put the name of the file in there, but this is an opportunity for them to put more information about the file in here. I thought that would be a good approach for our attachments. Now keep in mind, whenever you work with attachments, you always have to save the record before you can add an attachment field. So there's also a dual purpose in having this here. They have to type the description of what they're going to be adding in order to actually add. So they'll have to save it and then attach the file to it. And that's by default in Dataverse. That's just kind of how things work. And there really isn't a good workaround for that other than to create the file as soon as you open it up. But it's better to go with an approach like this. All right, let's go back to our tables. And I actually think we're ready to start working on our acquisition request form. So let's go ahead and jump into this. And we're going to modify our form. Let's go to the main form. And we can start adding and kind of setting things up in here. This is going to be the part that probably takes the longest, is actually updating this, because there's a lot of fields that we have to do, and then there's a lot of logic that we need to build into this particular form. We'll start by first creating the form, and then we're going to start building some of the logic on the form. All right, so first let's go ahead and add our purchase type. So we'll find that purchase type field here. We'll add that in there. And then let's do our request type. And then we'll do our requester right away. And request ID is automatic, so we don't necessarily need to put it on there, but we might put that on here in a little bit. Let's leave that one to a little bit later. And then we're going to do organization supported. Again, we're trying to just kind of put it in there in a way that kind of makes sense to start off with. And then we'll probably move some stuff around as we go here. Organization funding. And then we've got a need by date here. And probably the priority is next. And maybe the sensitivity, whether it's restricted. And any notes. Now status is automatic, so we don't have to do anything with that right off the bat. And then these are going to be assigned by other people, so we don't necessarily want to put them on here. And we've got our contract information. Now let's go ahead and add another section here. So we'll do a one column section, and that might be changed into a two column section. And if we need to, we can always select this and change it to a two column very easily. But let's go ahead and put our contract information in here. So that would be a contract type. And then we want to have our contract start and end date for our period of performance. And then maybe the estimated value, probably sole source, and then sole source justification makes sense after that. And then let's do the vendor selection. And I just saw we missed sensitivity justification, so we want to put that on here. And then I just saw another field, we need justification, so we'll put this over here. All right, let's go ahead and create another section. This will be for our shipping information, so let's do a one column section again. And it doesn't really matter where it goes because we're going to rearrange all this anyway. Now, from this one, from POC, and then our to POC, and then we'll do our to address, to organization. I think I'll probably put that above the address. And service level, and probably signature required. Support for existing program, probably over here. LOA assigned is going to be used by our budget analyst, so we don't need to worry about that. Request ID, again, that's an auto number. Not sure that I'm going to put that on here. Maybe we'll put it up at the top. Let's scroll up here and we'll put request ID in there. And let's move this up. Now, since it's an auto number, we're going to select this and we are going to make that read only. And we're also going to make name read only because we're going to automation that's going to control that. Now, in order to save, we probably want to have request type filled out. So let's go ahead and change this to a required field. And we probably want to have our organization supported as a required field also. So let's change that. I have a feeling many of these initial fields here are going to be required. And we'll make this a required field also. Need by date. And I think all of these are probably good as required fields. Again, we want most of this to be filled out before it's submitted. So most of this is going to be required. Support for existing program is kind of an optional. Priority probably needs to be a required field, but it's really going to be up to you on how you use this, on whether you're going to make it required or not. But for my assessment of the tool, I kind of feel like these are probably all required fields. So we're going to go ahead and make that adjustment now. Again, I like to be able to see everything kind of on the screen before I make these decisions about whether it should be a required field or not. And sometimes I flip them back to not required, like in the case of name fields, for example, especially if I'm going to use Power Automate to run the update. And I think we spelt this wrong, so let's go ahead and edit this quick. Acquisition request status notes, that looks better. And I think we're actually going to remove that from this. The submitted's not going to have initial notes because it's just going to be automatically submitted. It'll be other people that'll change the status as it goes through the process here. Now, from POC to organization to address service level and signature required, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and change the name of this section to be shipping details. And we'll call this shipping details. And then we've got our contract details here. So we'll call this section contract details. And same thing, let's change this to. All right, so now we've got those two things renamed. We'll call this acquisition request details. Just say request details. And let's not hide the label. All right, so that looks pretty good. So we've essentially got all of our information now. Restricted is a yes, no column, so we can go ahead and add that as a toggle. So let's do input, and then we'll do a toggle. And we'll go ahead with restricted yes or no. Add that in there. And then we can go ahead and delete this one out of there. And sole source was also a toggle, so let's go ahead and do that one here. And let's delete this. And then we've got signature required is also a toggle, so let's go ahead and add that in there. And delete the previous one. All right, let's go ahead and save and publish, and then we'll make some more modifications as we go. Let's go ahead and split this into two columns here. And let's go ahead and we'll move this over here. And pretty much everything else will go over here also. Sensitivity. And we'll go ahead and sensitivity justification. And we'll put our restricted over here. And for our restricted, let's go ahead and make that read only. And for our need by date, put this over here. And then our justification. Now for justification, I actually want to edit this. We'll edit the table column. And we'll call this the request justification. Hit save. And we'll change our form label also here. All right, so that looks good. And for our shipping details, we actually want this to be controlled by a business rule. So let's go ahead and click here and we'll do a new business rule. All right, so for our condition, we want this to be based off of our request type. So let's find a request type here. And let's go ahead and find the specific one for shipping. So we want it to be equal to shipping. If it's equal to shipping, then we want to make fields visible. So let's go ahead and hit add. And our condition will be request type equals shipping and apply. Now we can add everything for our yes conditions, and then we'll add all of our things for our no conditions here. Before we do that though, let's go ahead and change this. And this is going to be request type equals shipping. And we're going to say main request type equals shipping. The from POC to POC to organization to address service level and signature square fields are visible. I think that makes sense. And let's go back to our components here. And we want to set the visibility. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and add a couple here for each one. So this will be on there at least 6 times. So let's go ahead and add that 6 times in here. Scroll over, so we got 4, 5, and 6. All right, so we've got our 6 for visibility. Now we need visibilities here also, so let's go ahead and add our 6 visibilities for here. This is going to be for if it isn't shipping. I want to add the negative also. All right, and there's more we still need to add, but let's go ahead and fill out our visibilities here. So for this one, it'll be our from POC visible. And we'll find our from POC and make it visible and hit apply. Now I'm going to do the rest of these really quickly through video editing. All right, now through the miracle of editing, everything's been done. I've set all of the visibles on the top, not visibles on the bottom. And then I went through and also set required. So everything that is visible is also required. And again, if it's no, then it'll be not required. And then if we go further down here, I also clear out all of the fields. And if I click on this, we can see that from POC, I just set it to clear. And in the case of the yes, no, I set that to no for signature required. And let's go ahead and hit apply for everything. Just make sure everything's been applied. And then we'll hit save here. And let's go ahead and hit the activate. It will validate it as part of it. Validation was successful. And we'll hit activate. All right, let's head back out of here. And hit done. So now we've got our new business rule. Now we also need one for contracts. So if you select up here that it's a contract, then we need all these contract details to also be made visible or not visible or cleared out. All right, so I went through and created some of the business rules here. And I added the ability to hide the contract details, as I mentioned, but then I also added another 2 in here. So in the case of contract details, you have sole source is yes or no. Well, when it's yes, then I want this to be a required field. When it's no, then I don't want it to be a required field. So I added a business rule for that. And then when I was looking up here, restricted is going to be based off of our sensitivity. So when the sensitivity is one of the restricted options that are in there, this is going to be automatically set to required. That's why we locked this field. So I added that business rule as well. Now, in the case of contract details, one of the things that might be kind of helpful for anybody that's looking at the system is when they select the vendor, having the vendor details in here. So if we come up here, we can go ahead and add a quick view. And for a quick view, we're going to go ahead and do vendor, and we'll do the information. So we'll hit done here. Now it put it in the wrong place. We want this down here. So let's go ahead and drag this down here, and it'll be right below the vendor. Perfect, just like that. Now, I think this will be better as a 2-column. So let's go ahead and set this as a 2-column. And let's go ahead and put the vendor over here. There we go. And we can go ahead and put the vendor right above it. Okay, so now when they select the vendor, they're going to get all this additional information right here. And I'd like to look at that a little bit better, so I think we'll go with that. Now, in the case of the shipping details, again, I think this could probably work as a double column. So let's go for 2 columns here. And we'll go ahead and put the service level over here and the signature required. You might be saying, well, that's not really that balanced. You could move a couple more over there. That's true, we probably could, but I suspect that we'll add another column or 2 for this over the course of using this tool. So I've got a little bit of expansion that is expected here based off of usability for whoever's using this particular tool. They're probably going to need some additional information that we haven't thought of. So I'm just giving a little bit of expansion room there. The same could be argued here, and I think that's definitely possible that we could have to add some more information in here. But for I think right now, I think this looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and save and publish. All right, so let's go back to the bottom here. Let's go ahead and add another 1-column section. Now this one's going to be for attachments. So we're going to say request attachments, and we'll rename this also. And then for that, we're going to do an editable subgrid. So let's go ahead and find an editable subgrid and add that in here. And in this case, it's going to be our acquisition request attachments. And let's go ahead and hit the save button here. Now we want to make sure we select show related records, and that's always going to reset the component. And we have to make sure that we have the same selection after this thing gets reset. And it does look like we've got the active and our attachments. I think we're good here. Let's go ahead and get rid of this label. We already have a label up on top, so I think that's probably good. And if we wanted to compress this a little bit, we could flip things around. Actually, let's try that. So let's go ahead and just copy this, and then we'll hide this label, and then we'll select this and reverse this. So now we've essentially got the request attachment on the same line as this instead of taking up additional space above. So that's pretty good. I like that. All right, I think we're good here. Let's save and publish again. All right, let's go ahead and add another 1-column section. Now this one, we're going to add an editable grid to it. So let's go ahead and edit our editable grid. And we need to add our purchase items. So let's go find our items list here. And here's our purchase items. We're going to add that. Active's fine. We don't need a subgrid. Everything else looks good. So let's hit done here. Now, same thing here. We want to make sure we have show related records, which resets it. And in this case, it did reset it. So let's go ahead and find that again. So we're looking for our purchase items. And it'll reset yet again. And there we go. So now we've got our purchase items. We'll go ahead and change this to our item list. And we'll go ahead and turn off the label here. And we'll switch this to a 1-column. So it takes up the full amount of space because it is a lot of information to display here. And we'll go ahead and select this section and move the entire section up here. All right, so that'll be right under our request details information. And then we need to add one more section here. And we'll add another subgrid. And for this one, it's going to be our package details. So let's go ahead and find package details here. And here are package details. And again, I don't know why they don't have the option here of selecting only show the related fields, because it doesn't make any sense they have to do this whole thing over again. But that's how it's set up. So that's what we have to pay attention to. So we'll do show related records, reset the component. And again, it reset everything for us. And we'll reset again. And we'll put in here package. And then we'll hide this label. And then we'll grab this section and move it up right under here. All right, now we've got all of our different components. I think for this item list, maybe we call it purchase item list. I don't know, I might change that. I haven't figured out exactly what the right words are going to be for that, but I think we've got everything now. So again, let's go ahead and save and publish. And the next thing we're going to worry about is we only want the purchase item list to be visible when we're doing something that requires purchasing items. So supplies typically. And then same thing with your package details. We only want this to be visible if we're doing shipping. So we're going to make the adjustment so these things are only visible under those circumstances. So the first thing we'll fix is the request type and the purchase type. The cascade filtering doesn't happen automatically. You have to configure it. And I might have not done this on the camera, so I did go back and adjust the request type table so that the parent type relationship is a parental relationship. So if you're following along and you're doing everything that I'm doing here, you will want to go back there and make sure that you've got the parent type column inside of the request type table as a parental relationship instead of a referential. And then once you select that, you'll be able to come down here and go to filtering, and we can filter by related rows. And then we'll go ahead and find our purchase type, and that will ensure that there's a filter here. All right, now let's go ahead and add another tab, and we'll call it a one column tab. And for the name of this tab, let's go ahead and call it the status history. And we'll go ahead and hide the label for this one. And let's go ahead and add a subgrid. And for this one, it's going to be our status histories, and hit done. And let's go ahead and hide our label for this. And let's go ahead and increase our maximum number of rows here to 50. But we're also going to say use available space. And let's go ahead and hide the related. So we'll select this and we'll select hide. We can always add that back in there should we need it, but pretty much everything that we need is on the general tab and our status history tab over here. Now what we could do is for some of these items, we could actually put them on their own tab, but typically users like to have the information readily available on one view. And again, it's not going to be as much. It's going to hide some stuff based off selection. So we'll see what this looks like, and then maybe we can move things to other tabs if that makes sense. Now we could also change the name of the general tab. In this case, we'll go ahead and call this request information. And let's go ahead and save and publish. And let's go back and now we'll actually create our app now so that we can actually see how things are progressing and what other changes we have to make. We'll do a model-driven app, and we'll call it the acquisition services and coordination. And we'll go ahead and hit create. And let's go to the settings here and let's adjust some stuff. So for navigation, we want to enable collapsible groups and enable areas. And then upcoming features, I usually enable both of these and hit save. All right, now let's go ahead and add a page. And this will be our requests. And show navigation, yes. And for this group, let's go ahead and name this requests. And we'll change our name of our area also. We'll call this request also. And then let's go ahead and add another area. And this one we're going to call the admin. And for this group, we'll call it admin settings. And then we'll add some more pages. Now for this one, let's go ahead and find our organization. And then we need our purchase type and our request type. And then let's go ahead and hit add. And if we expand this, we can see we've got our organizations, our purchase types, and our request types in our admin setting area. That looks pretty good. We may need to move organizations into the request area of the app, but I think most of the time organizations are pre-established by the admins. So that's why we put it here. And it looks like we selected the wrong organization. So let's go ahead and remove this. So we'll remove from navigation. And then we'll actually remove from our app. And then we'll go ahead and add another page. And instead of selecting the first one, we'll select the second one. There we go. Now we've got the right one. And I think I'm going to move this up. That seems to make sense for how to set this up. And if we go back to our request area, let's go ahead and add another group here. And let's change the name of this to vendors. And then we'll add a page for vendors. All right, so now we've got those two areas. All right, so since we added vendors, let's go ahead and adjust the name of our area here. And we're gonna go ahead and call it acquisition management. All right, so let's go ahead and adjust our icons here. So for acquisition request, let's go ahead and go to our settings, and then we go to our default icon, and we're going to use a web resource for our acquisition request. And we'll find a new web resource, and we'll choose a file. And for this one, we'll do the receipt icon. Again, these need to be SVG files for doing this. So go ahead and, so if you're looking to change it, look for SVG icons, and those will work for this. Let's hit open, and we'll enable for mobile and for offline, and hit save and publish. And then we just need to find it. So it was receipt, and apply. And then we can see that our icon has changed here. It might take a little while for it to update here, usually after save and publish, and then when we open up the app, it'll be there. Let's go ahead and change our vendor one also. All right, now I've got all the icons adjusted. And the reason why I always upload my own, if you pull them from other solutions, you can run into import-export issues, because a lot of the icons that are loaded there are in managed solutions. And you can't pull from managed solutions. I do wish that it would tell you whether it's from a managed solution or an unmanaged, because you could easily use something that's from an unmanaged solution. It's when it's a managed solution you typically run into some problems. Let's go ahead and publish, and we can see that our icons have updated. So if we go back to our other area here, we'll go ahead and look, and we can see that all of our icons have been updated. Now let's go ahead and actually test out our app. Now in our app, we can see that our icons have been adjusted. And again, you can pick whatever icons make the most sense for you. I generally change them, but it isn't always easy to find an icon that makes sense for what you're looking at. Let's go ahead and go to our admin area here. And we're gonna have to add some organizations. And we've already got a couple purchase types that we added in here. And then we'll have to add some request types in here. Now let's go ahead and add an organization. And this would be the executive. Save and close. And then we'll hit new. And this one will be the IT department. And then we'll save and hit new. So we can kind of test out the functionality as we go here. And maybe this is the sales department. And then we'll go save and new. And one more. And we'll just say the purchasing department. And we'll hit save and close. So now we've got a couple different options. So if we go back to our area here, we've got 4 to choose from, and we've got our purchase types and our request types. Now let's go back to our main area, and we'll need some vendor options in here. So we'll go ahead and add a couple of vendors. Now, in the case of how I've got this set up here, I've got 2 columns. Right now, I've only got 1 required field. Not every vendor is going to have a phone number, email, URL, or address. So I think for this particular setup, maybe this is the best way to do this. But each organization is going to have different requirements for what they put in here. Now, for updating this, let's go back to the main screen here, and we're going to go up to Export to Excel and open it in Excel Online. And we're going to add information through copy and paste into here. Just so we can demonstrate how this works. Let's go ahead and hit here, and I'll paste from an Excel that I've got. And there we go. Now we've got our emails, our URLs, our addresses, phone numbers, and names, and we're going to hit save. This is a very effective and very quick way of importing information that you may already have from, and you can see I use this quite a bit actually, and I do every once in a while have errors. So you can see I had errors here, and usually this is from a copy and paste issue where I didn't quite have everything aligned to the right column match, and it caused a conflict there. So do make sure that you've got everything in the correct order. And let's go ahead and refresh. And it goes through several stages: transforming, parsing, importing, quite a few different stages in here. But it's a great way to get the information in there, especially if you're building something to replace a previous product, maybe like an Access database, or maybe it was a SharePoint-based approach. You want to move it over to a model-driven app. This is a great way to get all that data in there, is use the Excel Online approach. Let's refresh again. Completed and no errors. All right, let's go ahead and close this off and refresh. And there we go. We've got our basic setup here. Now, if we go to our requests, we've got information necessary to start our request process. So let's go ahead and hit new, and we can see what this is going to look like. And our request ID, we said that's a lock field. Name is a lock field. That's going to be updated by our Power Automate. Request ID is going to be an auto number. And if we go over here, we'll be able to select a purchase card or a contract. Let's go ahead and do our purchase card. And then we'll go ahead for the request type. And we've got our IT equipment, our shipping, and our supplies. Now, if we didn't want to have it set up this way, we could reverse things. Again, this is how our lookup is set, so we can adjust how this looks if we don't like this. And for this one, let's go ahead and go with supplies. And our organization supported, we'll go ahead and say the executive department. And the executive department is also the funding. It isn't going to be for an existing program. And then we'll do a routine, sensitivity. We'll just say public internal for this one. No concerns about restrictions or sensitivity. And that'll be locked. And again, because we didn't pick a more restrictive option, it's not going to change this to yes. And our need by date, let's go ahead and say we need this by, I don't know, the 3rd. And our request justification to test the system. Now, when we hit save, some of these other fields down here are going to become an option. So let's hit save. And all of a sudden now we can add our item list. And it looks like I got the name wrong here. This is correct purchase item list, but this should have been the package information. And then we've got our ability to add attachments. Now, we don't have any package, so we don't actually want this to be visible because we're not shipping anything. And that's something we're gonna have to do through JavaScript. We would have the same problem if we had selected a package. We would have still seen this information down here. Now, to hide these sections, we're gonna actually have to use JavaScript. If you were in a Canvas app, you would use Power Effects formulas to very easily hide this. Instead of a model-driven app, it's not necessarily more difficult, but it is a different programming language. You have to use JavaScript to do this. So we're going to cover how to do that here coming up in this video. But otherwise, it looks like everything is working the way that it's supposed to be. Now let's go ahead and we'll add a new purchase item. So let's go ahead and select this. And we'll see what this process looks like. So you can see that our automation worked. It put in the information that we told it to put in there. and it fit without any problems. Our date format, so we know that the automation is definitely working there. And for this, let's say that we're going to buy coffee, and our item type will be supplies, and our vendor in this case will be Staples. Staples does sell coffee, and we'll go ahead and add the URL for our coffee there, and we'll just get one package of this, and again it's just a box, and the unit price for this is $12.99. A calculated field, so that'll be locked, and we'll say Keurig K-Cup Caribou Blend. And that'll be the item that we're going to buy with this request. So let's go ahead and hit save and close. And when we come back here, we'll see that we've got one item added, and we can continue to add more items just by clicking new purchase items. All right, and if we scroll down, we can see we've adjusted the name of this. And let's go ahead and add an attachment here, so we can demonstrate how this is going to look. And we'll say this is a screen capture of the product, and we have to hit save, and then we'll be able to choose our file. So let's choose file, and here is our file. So let's go ahead and select that and hit open. And we've added our attachment, and we'll go ahead and save and close. And if we scroll down here, we can see that our attachment is added and what it's called. So if we go ahead and select this, all right, let's go ahead and hit the back button here. So everything's looking like it's working pretty good. We have to hide our package when it's not shipping. And we've got our purchase item list. So from a purchase request item for supplies, we can see that everything is working. All right, let's go ahead and head back to our main screen here so we can see what this looks like. And as you can see, everything is showing here. Now we can see that the status is submitted. So everything again is working. Our automations seem to be working and doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. All right, so I went through and added a couple of records so that we could test out some stuff and kind of get through the rest of this. One particular part of this video would be incredibly long if I did it as part of the video. So I'm gonna just kind of show you how to do it. And then if you want to replicate it, you'll have all the information on how you can do that. Now, if we go ahead and look at this one here, this is a purchase cart item for supplies. So if we click on this, we're going to see that we have our basic information, the item that we added earlier, and then the attachment that we added earlier. So it shows us only what we need to see. As we were talking about earlier, I've already put the JavaScript in here to eliminate the unneeded sections. So this is what that effectively looks like when it's done. Let's go back here again, and we'll look at a contract as an example, because the sections here are very different, right? So we have our basic information, and in this particular case, I chose a restricted option. So our rule changed this for us to say restricted. And then we've got our vendor information. And then remember, we created that quick view form right here. So all of the vendor information shows on this form. And then in this case, I didn't add any attachments to this one here. Now, one other thing that I made a change to, and I'm going to explain how to do this, is in this particular item, we're doing a shipping. So we have shipping details and we have package specifics. So if I hit the package specifics here, you'll notice I get this quick create form. And creating these is incredibly easy. What you might run into some problems with is actually getting this to pop up on the screen. It isn't exactly as intuitive setting this up as it really should be, but I'm going to walk you through how to actually create this and get it turned on right now. All right, so in our table structure, you can see here we're on package details, we're on forms, and then I've got a form quick create. And this is actually incredibly easy to create. All you have to do is hit new form and select the quick create form. Pick a name that is before your first form. This sometimes helps, is it does matter on ordering. I think Microsoft could revamp how this works and make it like a toggle to say, hey, you want to use the main form or do you want to use your quick create form? And I think that would work a little bit better. Something a little bit more hard-coded in there so that the user could select exactly what they're looking for. I think that would work a little bit better than what the process is right now. Hopefully Microsoft will make this a little bit easier in the coming years. But all you have to do is create a form. Now, if we look at this one, the out-of-the-box approach is you get 3 sections, and you can just kind of rename your sections just like everything else. You just kind of click what you want to change, put what you hear. Same thing with the toggles. If you want to add a toggle, you can do it just like on the previous form I demonstrated. This is all very, very simple. Save and close, and then you're done pretty much with creating your quick create form. Let's go ahead and hit back. The one thing that you have to do, and we did this for all of our tables, but if you're running into problems, here's the kind of the checklist of things to troubleshoot is you make sure it's the first one on the list. And then if you go to our package detail table here, you're going to want to go over here and look and confirm that you've got your leverage quick create form on. You saw that every single table that I created, I did that. And that's the reason why, is because I want to have the ability to use it. I'm not necessarily always going to use the leverage quick create form, but I want to have the ability to. So I always turn that on as the first thing. The very next step that you need to do is not that intuitive, because a lot of times we go to publish all customizations and we publish all customizations. That works great, but it doesn't necessarily make it so that your quick create form works. What you also need to do is in your package details, or any of these tables for that matter, you want to go up here to advanced and you want to publish the table. This seems to be what allows the quick create form to work in my experience. Every time that I have a strange issue or something's not working the way that it's supposed to, whether it's this or it's the search index being turned on, usually publishing the table will resolve those issues. So if you're having any kind of a strange issue, this is how you would do it. When I first started doing model-driven apps, I could not for the life of me figure out how to get the indexes working or how to get the quick create forms working. And then all of a sudden I hit the publish table. It was kind of like my last option. I tried everything else, refreshed it a couple of times, walked away from the app for a little bit, came back, and all of a sudden it was working. And that happened a couple times afterwards where I wasn't 100% sure, was it that I turned off the quick create form, deleted it, re-added it, turned off the table settings, which portion specifically did it. But the common thread is usually right around the time I hit publish table, that fixed it. So that's kind of my final step whenever I'm getting ready to actually use the quick create form. And you noticed earlier when I created the item, it went into the full form. It didn't do the quick create. That's because I had not published the table yet. So as soon as I published the table, that started working. So there's no documentation out there that I've seen from Microsoft that says, don't forget to do this specific step here in order to do that. But it does seem to work. So if you do run into issues, try this and that will usually fix the problem. Now back here, let's go ahead and add our description box of envelopes. Who knows? And we'll just say envelopes, I don't know, $5. And maybe this is, I don't know, 10 by 5 by 3. And weight is maybe, I don't know, 1 pound maybe. And we'll say no hazmat and no lithium. And let's go ahead and save and close. And it's a great user experience to have that quick create form because you don't get taken away back to the other main form and leave this screen to work on it. You can do everything from right here. And if I hit new package details, I never have to leave this screen to do it. So I really like quick create forms. I just think that they should fix the publish table. So when you publish all customizations, maybe it publishes the table at the same time. Or again, when you're setting this up, give the user the explicit option to pick a quick create form to use for this function. There are ways to do this using JavaScript also. You can do that if you go through and adjust your subgrid and add a button, and then you can kind of program the button to do it. So if you do run into this problem, that's always an option. But like I said, typically publish table does fix this particular issue. Now that works for pretty much everything. Now you could actually do it for the whole request, but as you can see, there's that's quite a lot on here. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this as a quick create form, but I suppose you could. You just probably wouldn't have all the same kinds of functionality. So it does work great. I don't believe it works with attachments. I've never tried to do it with an attachment, but I don't think it would work with an attachment. I could be wrong. I just don't think that you have the ability to add an attachment field for attachments. So I think you're limited to using an actual form for this. Now, the last part is, how did we actually get this working? Let's go back to our form. Now, on our form, we actually need to put a JavaScript resource here, and we need to add that. You can actually do it here, but I usually recommend doing it right from the solution. So in the solution, you would first create your JavaScript code, And you can see I've got mine loaded right here. So that's essentially what I put together. The process of adding it is really simple. You just hit new, you hit more, and then you do a web resource here, and then you find the file, or you can just copy and paste the code in here. I typically upload the file, that way if I need to make any changes, and there's quite a bit of debugging in this process of building the code. I've probably spelt the word acquisition wrong half the time that we've been doing this video. I do a lot of fat fingering of code, so it does take me a little bit of time to troubleshoot what I made a mistake on. That would take a long time on video to do the coding for it. That's why I didn't particularly want to put that in here, because all my spelling errors and fat fingers and hitting the wrong buttons makes debugging kind of a challenge. But this is how you would upload it once you get it created. So what does the code look like? Now, this is the code file, and I did add some markup on here to kind of explain the steps as you're looking at this, kind of what it does. I'm going to walk through it here just to make it a little bit easier on you. But this first thing is basically, this is what I'm going to name the file. And I like to put that up there so that if I reference it anywhere in here, I know exactly what it is. And I've already kind of named it ahead of time. So we can see that the name of the file that we're open here is this file. And then we start with the basics, right? So we're going to create our functions. And in this first portion here, all we're doing is creating constants. Now, in the case of a contract ID, this is essentially the lookup GUID for the contract. And it's the same thing for shipping. And then from here, this is the section names on our form. And all we're doing is creating these as constants. They're never going to change, but that way our code can reference things later on after we've created these. Each one of our sections has a name. So for example, if we click on this section here, and here I clicked on the grid, this is not the section. So just be careful that you're looking at the right thing. This is the section, right? And you can see purchase item list. And if we click on this next section here, we'll see it's the shipping details. And this next section is the package specifics. And then we've got our contract information here, right? So those are the 4 sections that I wanted to control the visibility for. So if we go back to our code here, we can see those 4 sections are loaded in here. And then what we're doing is a simple lookup. And all I'm doing is getting the attribute value to make sure that we know the ID. And then we're going to make it lowercase, and we're going to strip out any curly braces or anything else from it. That's really all this does here. And then for this portion here, all we're doing is finding the section. And again, sections can be in different tabs. So it's essentially going to look through everywhere to find the sections that we've told it to look for as part of that process. And then all we're going to do here is set the visibility of the sections it finds so that they're not visible. And really here's where we actually start getting information about what's going on the form. So we're essentially starting our rules process, if you will, in this area here. And in this particular section here, we're actually looking at the 2 specific fields, the purchase type and the request type, because they kind of control everything, right? So if it's a purchase type of contract, well, there's only a couple things that are keyed in off of a contract selection. Pretty much everything else runs off of our request type, because for your purchase type of a purchase card, shipping, well, we need the shipping information, and pretty much everything else needs everything but the shipping information. So we're essentially getting the information here for making these determinations as we go. And then here we're just going to hide everything. So we're just going to start off with everything hidden, and then we're going to start to make things visible based off of the values that we found. Now that's pretty much the entire code. And if you use the pause and the rewind, you'll be able to get it on there. I'm going to try and copy and paste this into the description of the video so you can go through and modify it yourself. I'm not sure if that's possible. I've never tried doing that, or if this will exceed the amount of text I can put in there. But that is my hope, is that I'll be able to put all this in there for you. That way, if you are following along, you can kind of go with it. Just keep in mind that there are spelling errors. I do fat finger things a lot of times. This code works. Obviously, I've demonstrated that it works, but I've changed acquisition in a couple areas where I spelled it wrong. It shouldn't change the schema and logical name. So if you see that it's spelled wrong here, it's because I spelled it wrong there. Actually, in this particular code, I don't think I used acquisition anywhere in here. So that particular issue is probably not here. Now, once we've created our JavaScript, we've uploaded it in there. Now we actually need to put it on our form. And with the form, so when you actually have like the whole form and we're actually looking at the form's properties, we go to events here. And for this particular approach for the code, you would go to onLoad, and then you would add an event handler. and we'd do onload, you'd find your library, and then the function in this case, let's go ahead and edit this, is this acquisition form visibility onload. So that's what you would put here, and then you would check both these boxes and hit the done button. That's all you need to do for the onload. But as you saw in our code, it relies heavily on these two fields here. So you are going to have to go to the events for each one of these. And again, you'll hit an event handler for on change. So let's just edit this and I can show you what that looks like. So you would make sure it's on change, and then you would find the document you uploaded, and then you would type this in your function box here and then check box for both. You'll do that exact same step for both the request type and the purchase type. So if I hit cancel here, if I come over here, and you'll see here that I've got it loaded the exact same way. No differences between how I've got it loaded in one area versus the other way. And that's it. All you have to do is save and publish from there. Publish all customizations, and then this should work for you, especially if you're following along with the build of this particular approach. But you could also modify the code that I provided to work in your specific situation, just pointed towards your section IDs and your specific fields, and then it would probably work the exact same way. It probably need a little bit of debugging, but for the most part, it should work. All right, let's back out of here. Now, one other thing that we didn't really talk about and do much with is primary keys. And this is probably most important with our lookup tables. Let's go ahead and look at our organization, for example. I've already kind of set this one up. It's always a good idea to have some sort of a primary key in a lookup table. And what that's going to do is keep from having duplicates. So in this case, the organization name is really what we need to worry about. Is you shouldn't have the same name twice. So if I have executive department, for example, I wouldn't want to put that in there twice. So I would add a key. And in this case, if you see, I created it, I just titled it organization and selected the organization field. And that's all that was necessary to create a key for here. If we look at purchase type is another good example. If we look at the data here, we've got two options, contact and purchase card. So purchase type is what we want duplicates. So I don't want to have contract in there 6 different times. So I'd go to keys here, and I would go ahead and select that purchase type as our primary key, and that's going to prevent the creation of duplication. Now, another great example might be your budget analyst. So if we click on this, you wouldn't necessarily want to have me assigned more than once in here. But that's something to consider is, do you want to have the ability to assign the same person to multiple different organizations? Now, what you could do is put a primary key that relies on 2 fields. And for example, you don't want Travis assigned to the executive department more than once. So let's go ahead and click key here and do that as an example. And this will say analyst and org. So we'll go ahead and select our budget analyst and our supported organization and hit save. Now, anytime you try to put the same budget analyst with the same organization, it's going to give an error that you can't do that. So again, I usually use some sort of a primary key in most tables. It's always a good idea to do something so you prevent duplication in there. It's definitely important for any kind of a lookup table, not necessarily as important for the request table. But same thing with the vendor. I would always put one in here also. And in this case, I did for the vendor name. I don't want to put the same vendor in there more than once. So that's how you handle primary keys inside of your application. All right, now let's go to the tables. And now we're on pretty much the last item for this build. And if we go to our acquisition request, and we're going to look at our views for this, let's go ahead and look at our active acquisition requests. Now we want colors to display. So we've got the colors on priority, and we've also got the colors on our status here. And we want that to be visible here. So what we can do is we can come over here and we can go to components, and we can add a component. And we're going to go ahead and get more components here. We're going to look for a grid. And we're going to find our Power Apps grid control. Let's go ahead and select this and hit add. Now let's go ahead and select it. All right, for setting this up, we don't want a child table, so we'll just collapse that. And we do want to have enable editing turned on. And I've gone through and already turned on some of these things before. So we've got the enable grouping turned on, enable aggregations turned on. I want to reorder. That's preview. It's been like that for a while, and it does work pretty good. Then we want to go ahead and scroll down here. I normally turn on the options set colors. That's exactly what we're trying to cover here. So you definitely don't want to miss that one there. That's usually the last thing that I have to adjust in here. So let's go ahead and hit the done button, and then we'll save, and then we're going to save and publish, and then we're going to wait for this to finish, go back, publish every customization for our app, and then refresh our app to see if we got colors. Everything's looking good. We've got our colors for our status, and we've also got our colors for our priorities over here. Now back in our solution, let's cover how to do charts. So if we pick our request table here, let's go ahead and click on charts, and we'll go ahead and create a new chart. Now, what do we want on our chart? Things that we like to see are obviously our status options here. So we can do a count of our statuses, or we could just do a count of our request ID, because it's just a count. And then let's go ahead and select our status. And it looks like we've got 2 submitted and 1 assigned. So it is going to give you a little bit of a preview here. And we'll say request by acquisition by status. Make it a little bit cleaner for our name there. And let's go ahead and save this and close. Now, what is another one we might want? Let's go ahead and create another chart here. And again, we'll use our request ID. Come down here for request ID. And now what we want to do is by purchase type. Oh, looks like our request ID didn't save in there. And we've got 1 contract and 2 purchase cards. So this is a very quick and easy chart that we can do here. And let's go ahead and save and close. All right, let's go ahead and create another chart here. And for this one, we'll do request ID again, because again, this is just our count. And let's go ahead and do purchase type. And for this one, let's do a stacked column. And let's add a category. And this time we'll do request type. So we've got our purchase card and our contract, and then it tells us by type what it is. Let's go ahead and do request by purchase type and request type. So we'll save and close that. Now let's go change this one around a little bit. Instead of doing a bar chart, let's do a pie chart. I think that'll work a little bit better. So we'll save and close this. Now we could also build them for sensitivity or restricted. So you can build a whole bunch of different charts for just this one table, because we got a lot of different columns to choose from. Estimated value, contract numbers. You could also build charts specific to tell you purchase card costs. So there's a lot of things you could probably do here. I think that's probably good. Let's go ahead and publish all of our customizations and then go check these out inside the app. All right, now that we're back in our app here, let's go show chart. And there we go. We have our purchase card and our contract. And if you hover over, you can do this. And you can also use it as a filter if you want to just actually filter based off of your chart. These are great for quick visuals and also great for quick filters on filtering your different data points. Let's look at our request by purchase type and request. And again, that's pretty good. I mean, again, you can also filter these down. Now you might have to make some adjustments as you put more and more information in here. This looks pretty good right now, but maybe if it gets a lot bigger, it's a lot harder to read. So maybe you'll choose a different chart type, or you'll configure this a little bit differently. But for right now, I think that looks pretty good until we get lots of different data in there, so we can see how we might want to refine it. And same thing for request by status. Again, this is going to get much bigger. This will adjust pretty forgivingly, so it is really easy to use. But I love that you can kind of do these filters also. So you can also just kind of filter the data, and then you can also do drill downs too. So you got a lot of flexibility in this. But that's how you would essentially create some charts to go along with your model-driven app. All right, we're coming up on the end of this particular video. What we've really got left are security roles. So how do we get permissions to this? And then how do we use those within the application itself? So let's go back to our solution, and we're going to start by building some security roles. All right, now in our solution, you have the option to create security roles right here. I recommend not going with this approach. I recommend using the admin center to do this particular step. And to get there, all we have to do is come up to this gear here and go to the admin center. Now inside the environment, all we have to do is go over to our security roles to see all. And then just toggle this, usually makes it a little bit faster. And we're going to go down to our basic user. And all I'm going to do is copy the basic user. And the reason why we do this is because there is a ton of stuff in the basic user. And everybody that's inside your environment that has an active account is already assigned to this. So this is kind of what Microsoft says is kind of the baseline. You can always change the baseline, but if you miss certain things in here, it might not work correctly for just accessing the environment, maybe the users table, maybe the security role table. You might run into a lot of issues. So it's probably best just to use the basic user is kind of the approach I go with. So let's go back to security roles here. And we're going to go ahead and copy this and come up with a different name for it. So in this case, we'll go with acquisition app admin. I'm going to copy this because we're going to need to do this a couple different times. And there we go. And we'll copy this. Now, fortunately, it's an A, so it's going to be at the top. It's going to be easy to find. So let's go ahead and select this. And now what we're looking for is everything that is on our environment that hasn't been assigned. And specifically, we're looking for anything that's acquisitions table related. There's going to be a lot of stuff here from other apps I've built, but we're looking for these acquisition tables. And what we want to do for admins is basically give them full access. So we're going to go here, and for each one of these, we're going to just give them organization. That's as much as you can give them. We're going to give them organization for pretty much everything. Just like that. So the admins have full rights over every table, and we're going to do that for every single table that belongs to this particular app, and nothing that doesn't belong to this app. All right, so we've done it. Everything has been assigned. There was essentially 11 tables that we created as part of this app, and they're all set to organization. Now, all we need to do is hit save and close. And now all those tables have been updated. Now we're going to open it back up. We'll make one more change here. Now we're going to look for team. And for team, we don't want them to necessarily be able to create teams. That might be something that you want to give them. Normally, if I'm going to give them the ability to create teams, it's going to be an isolated environment with no other apps in it, because this will potentially impact other apps created in this environment. So think long and hard before you give them creatability here. But we do want to give our admins the ability to append and append to. And somebody would say, well, they don't really need append, or they don't really need append to. I just give them both. It's just a little bit safer on the design. It's not really going to hurt anything to be able to do both options. And we're going to use teams for actually assigning people to this app and these different security roles that we're creating here. So we want to make sure that they have the ability to kind of control that. All right, let's go ahead and save and close. And that is our admins. Now we need to do that a couple more times for each different role that you might build in there. So for example, your budget analyst is probably going to have a role specifically to them. So you're going to need to create a security role for the budget analyst. You're going to need to create a role for people that can submit things. Maybe you'll have another role in there for people that can go in there and maintain lookup tables, right? So for each function of what needs to be happening in the app, you're going to create a security role to kind of control that. And you're going to tailor each permission for that role. Let's go ahead and create the basic user, somebody that's just going to go in and create their items and be able to see their items. So let's go ahead and copy this again. And let's go ahead and put our name in here. And we'll call this the contributor. This person is just really going to have access to their stuff. And let's copy that. All right, now let's go ahead and edit this. And again, we'll do only unassigned tables, and we'll do our OSP. Now, one of those little caveats, learning things, I didn't necessarily do it in here. OSP is usually a pretty good way to find what you're looking for because it's on the logical and the schema name for pretty much everything. So it makes it very easy to find what you're looking for. If you had a specific name in the actual name, you could also filter down on that. So for example, if every table that I created had acquisition in the name, I could have filtered specifically on acquisition and found all the related tables very quickly and very easily using that approach. All right, so in terms of our app user, the person that's putting in something, here's kind of what I've got set up. Now, this would require some fine tuning. So essentially you would do some tests with the users to make sure that everything is working the way that it's supposed to. But in terms of the request, obviously we're going to have it at the user level, so they can create everything at the user level, and then they can append to essentially at the organization level. They really shouldn't need an ability for append, but this might be something that we would need to fine tune as it's being used to make sure that everything's working correctly. And again, it'll be kind of the same thing for the status history. Now in this case, I don't want the users deleting statuses. So if there's an issue of any kind, they'll have to reach out to an admin to delete a historical item. I don't know why you would have to do that. Every time you change the status, it's going to create that entry. So there's not really a reason why you shouldn't have to delete anything. So that's why I didn't give them the ability to do that. So this is essentially how you set this up, is you go item by item. Now, budget analysts, for example, they have no ability to create. They shouldn't. That should be an admin function. They don't even need to write anything because this is being assigned by somebody on a team that's going through and managing all of this. They're going to actually assign the budget analyst. So they shouldn't have the ability to do that. And really, they don't need the ability to do anything else related to this particular record at all. So that's how we've got it set up. And if we keep going down here for funding lines, they can read it, they can't delete it, they can't create it. Again, this is going to be by the budget analyst. So they have very limited control over this. And if we keep going down here, it's kind of the same story as we go through all of this. Again, this might need to be fine-tuned. Permissions and security roles is always one of those things where you really do want to test everything out thoroughly to make sure that people are seeing what they're supposed to see and they can do the things that they're supposed to be able to do, and that they can't do things they're not supposed to be able to do. So that's really what we're doing with this, is kind of defining that for them. All right, let's go ahead and save and close. All right, let's go ahead and use our basic user again. So let's go ahead and copy this. And this time we're going to do the acquisition app budget analyst and hit copy. And let's go ahead and open this up. Now the budget analyst is kind of similar. Their role is a little bit different. They usually support the entire organization. So they need to be able to at least read everything associated with this application, so they can read everything that's going to be on the request or related to the request. But then really what they need to be able to do is update the request itself. And maybe you've got other tables. In this particular case, we really didn't create another table for the budget analyst. The fields are specifically inside of the request. They don't need the ability to create a request, but they do need the ability to be able to update the request, the fields that we've set for them. Similarly, they need to be able to create a status history if the status is going to change. And one of the status that we've got for them is to change it that the line of accounting has been assigned. So we need to be able to set all this in there. Again, for all these security roles, if you don't get it right the first time, don't worry about it. That's what you have testing in there. I make no promises that this will survive contact with testing. This is my best guess without having done any testing on what we would need to give them. But it isn't uncommon, even for me, to run into little glitches here and there where I didn't quite get all the permissions, or I didn't set it quite to the level that they need to be able to access in order for it to work correctly. So expect to have to do some fine tuning as you go through this process. I think this is probably pretty close to right. It's usually an append to or an append that'll catch you. And the way to look at append and append to, if this is kind of your first time in here, is append is the child being created or updated needs to append, and a parent being referenced needs append to. So that's one way to kind of look at how to view append to or append. If you're aware of another way to describe that might make more sense, let me know in the comments. I'm always open to learn new ways to kind of teach or provide information that people can understand. But for me, that kind of made sense to how that's supposed to work. All right, let's go ahead and hit the save and close here. All right, let's go back to our settings here. And now we're going to look at teams. And let's go ahead and create a team. And our name is going to be an acquisition app admin. So essentially the exact same thing that we had for our security roles. The business unit is going to be our base unit. We didn't create a lot of business units with this. I'll be the administrator for this. And then we select owner for our team type here. And you can put a description in this here as well. This is something I would usually recommend putting in there, but we're going to skip that for this. And we're going to hit next. And we're going to skip the adding team members. Now, here's important. We're going to find and select our security role that we created. So let's go ahead and select this and hit save. And save again. So that security role is assigned to this team. So everybody that we add to this team is going to get all the permissions associated with that security role. Let's go ahead and create the rest of our teams. All right, so now we've got our 3 teams created. Now we got to actually bring the team information into our app. So let's go back to our solution now. Now, back in our solution, let's actually go out of here and we're going to go to tables. And let's go ahead and find the team table. Let's open this up. And in forms, we're going to go ahead and create a copy. And in this case, I've already done this once for a different development. So let's go ahead and open this one up. Now we can modify this. I've already got it set up the way that I was looking for. I'm not going to necessarily recreate this because I've already done that. What we're trying to do is not bring everything into our app. So I'm not going to change anything with this, but all I would do is hit save a copy and I would change the name. And then I would use this to bring it into my app if I hadn't already done that. Let's go ahead and hit the cancel button here. And just for reference, I copied this one. So let's go ahead and click this. And you'll see that it looks very similar to the other one. So all I did was save a copy and then renamed it. That's all I did for doing this process. Let's hit the back button here. And let's go back to our team. And you would do the exact same thing here for our view. Now, in the case of the view, we're actually going to change this again. So let's go ahead and select this one. And we're going to go ahead and save as. And we're going to change this to our acquisition services and coordination. And we'll just delete this for now. I can come back in here and edit that later and hit save. Now, the reason why I'm doing this for this one, but not the other one, this one's actually got a filter applied that we're going to modify. So we're going to go ahead and select our filter here. And we're going to change this contains. And in this case, we're going to say acquisition and hit apply. So now we've got the 3 teams that we created here. Now, unfortunately, you can't change the name of this easily. There's not like a simple way to do this. This is pulled directly from the table. So in order to change this, we'd have to go to the table and adjust this for a view. I don't know why Microsoft built it like that, but you could modify the table. I just don't like doing that, especially for things I'm going to export to other environments, because the other environment doesn't have that change. And it can cause some interesting issues, especially if you've over customized an environment where you end up bringing a ton of stuff with you because of all the customizations you've made. All right, let's go ahead and save and publish. And let's go back to our solution. All right, now that we're back in our solution, let's go ahead and add an existing item. And it's going to be a table. And let's find our team table. And this is what we're going to bring in as team. So let's hit next. Now, ignore this side over here. We don't need to do this at all. We're going to go ahead and edit objects. And we don't need anything except for the views and forms. So in this case, all we're going to do is our modified team form. And then we're going to go to our views. And we're going to use our acquisition service and coordination team. And we're going to add that. So we've got 2 objects, one form and one view, and we're going to hit add. All right, now that we've got it in, let's go to the team. And for the view, let's go ahead and select this, and we're going to set this as the default view. All right, so that's our default view. Now let's go to our app and actually add it into our app. Now I want this to be in our admin area, so let's go to our admin, and then we'll add a Dataverse table. And let's go ahead and select our team and show it in navigation. And there we go. So this is our default. And if we click on this, we'll see the specific information here. So now what we have to do is add people in here. And then we've got admins. They'll have the ability to essentially access all the different tables and everything that we created. Let's head out of this. Let's go ahead and actually I want to move this to the top first. Let's move this up. They're going to spend a lot of time doing this even after they get everything else set up. So I always put that at the top so it's very quick and easy to find. This is the most likely place that people are coming after you get all this other stuff set up. So let's go ahead and save and publish. And let's go ahead and back out of here. Now, the other thing we have to do with the app is we have to share the app. So let's go ahead and select the app. And what we need to do is select our 3 roles that we created. All right, so here are our 3 roles. So we'll go ahead and select those 3 roles and we'll hit share. So now it's complete. We've essentially shared the app. We've given them permission to all the different tables and everything that this app requires to be able to perform correctly. All right, let's go ahead and close this out. All right, let's go up to all here, and then we want to add those security roles that we created. So we'll go add security role, and then we're going to find our 3 security roles that we created and add them in here. Now, if we were to export it, this would be essential. Everything that you use as part of your app needs to be part of your solution in order to actually export this. So now we've got these 3 security roles in here, and we can access these very easily just by clicking on here. A lot of times when I work with security roles, I still work on them from the admin center, because the admin center, I can click on this and I've got the ability to add people right here if I wanted to. Now in this case, we're using Teams, so that's a little bit different of a setup, but if I wanted to adjust the tables or something like that, you could always just click this and then it'll open it up so you can modify the tables. I just like the additional abilities from the admin center to make other changes to this. Let's go ahead and hit the back button now. Now, what are some other things we can do now that we've got the security roles created? Well, let's go take a look at our funding lines, and we'll look at our form here, and we'll select our information form here, and then we'll select form settings. Now, one of the things that you've got here is the ability to specify security roles. So if you create a form specifically for specific people, you can assign that form, that view, whatever you've created, a specific security role. And everybody that doesn't have that security role won't be able to open up that form or that view or whatever you're talking about. So that's how you can use security roles to control what information people can access. Let's go ahead and close this out. We're not going to cover that specifically. I'm just going to explain how you would do that. It's relatively straightforward on how you would use it though. Now let's go into our app. And there is one other thing that we want to cover as part of this. And let's go to our admin area. Now our admin area, we want only our admins to be able to see this information. If you stopped right here and didn't do anything else, everybody that comes in here is going to be able to see this. They might not be able to add anything or change anything, but they're all going to be able to see it. So we don't want them to be able to see the information here. So what we need to do is expand this and go to the settings here. Now we're on our teams. Let's go ahead and expand this, and we're looking for table privileges. So let's go ahead and add a table privilege, and we're going to go find our team table, select that. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify what makes an admin unique compared to the other security groups that we create. So let's go ahead and uncheck this. And an admin can append and append to, but none of the other security roles that we created have that ability to do that. And to confirm this, let's go ahead and look at them. So in this case, this is the admin, and we can see that they essentially have the append and append to that we created. Now let's go look at one of the other ones. Now this is our budget analyst, and if we scroll over here, we can see that for append and append to, they have no rights. So by selecting these here, we're making it so that none of the other security roles can see this view. So we'll hit apply there, and that's all we need to do. But we need to do it for each one. So we would come into the organization view, and then we would come down here to our advanced settings, and we would create a table privilege for our organization. And again, we would identify what makes them different between admin and our other groups. Now for these here, the one that really stands out for these is the ability to write or delete. None of the other security roles that we created have the ability to write or delete. So that's what I would use for these 3 to differentiate them from admin. So the admins will be able to see it, nobody else will be able to see this. And because we've limited so they can't see any of these, they're not even going to see the admin area at all. All right, let's go ahead and save and publish. And let's go ahead and back out of here. Now, the very last thing that we're going to do as part of this video, there is a ton of things that we could do. So I'm trying to be selective of the big areas, and let's go ahead and create an automation. And in this case, we're going to do a business process flow. All right, let's go ahead and put a name in here. Acquisition request life. And for the table, it is going to be our acquisition request. Let's go ahead and hit the create button here. All right, let's go ahead and select this. And for the name, let's go ahead and call this submitted. And for the category, this will just be identify. And let's go ahead and apply this. And let's go ahead and expand this. Now we're going to go ahead and find our components here and add our next stage right away. And our next stage is going to be our assignment stage. And this one we'll put in their research and hit apply. And let's go ahead and click this again. Oh, good. It did automatically populate it there. Just wanted to make sure of that. And let's go to our next component. And again, we're going to add another stage here. And for this one, we'll call it the budget review. And for our category, we'll go ahead and do propose and apply. And then we're going to have another stage. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and call it processing. And for this one, we'll go ahead and put it as propose and apply. I'm going to look at budget review again. I don't like propose. I think we're going to change this to, let's go with develop. I think that works better. And hit apply. And let's go ahead and add another stage for closed. And for closed, we're just going to select close and hit apply. All right, so now we've got all of our stages. Now we got to actually add steps to it, or things that we're going to accomplish as part of each of these different stages. So let's go ahead and select our data step here. And for this data step, we're going to go ahead and select our purchase type. And we'll go down to our purchase type here. And we'll say that it's required and hit apply. And then we'll come back over here and we'll add another data step. And for this one, we're going to say it is our request type. And there we go. And again, that's required. So we're going to hit apply. And then we're going to drag another one over here. And for this one, we're going to say it is the need by date. And we'll go select that and required and hit apply. And then we'll add one more on here. And this one's going to be our request just, and that is going to be our request justification and required, and hit apply. All right, let's go do the assignment stage here. And for our data step here, we'll select that, and then we'll do assign to, we'll go ahead and match it. So we'll say assign to, and we'll say this is required, and hit apply. And let's go ahead and add another step here for the assignment, because we have the assign to, but we've also got our budget analyst. So let's go select our budget analyst here. And we'll say that's a required also, and we'll hit apply. So now we've assigned basically the two people that need to be assigned. Now let's go ahead and expand our budget review. And let's go ahead and select this step here. Now, what are we looking for here is LOA assigned, and we'll say that's required. Let's go ahead and hit apply. Now, one thing we could add, and we'd have to modify our table to do this, we're essentially relying on the budget analyst to have already assigned a line of accounting to this request, and then come in here and say that they did that. We could also do a roll-up count inside of the table that looks at the LOA table to see that there's actually been something assigned. And if it is, then we could add that here for confirmation. So that's kind of one of those you might want to add so you don't have to rely on them to actually have done it. But in most organizations, people are reliable enough before they check the box for LOA assigned that they actually did the LOA assigned inside the system. So I think we're good with this, but that would be something you could add in there, is the confirmation that an actual LOA has been added into the LOA table. Now I do want to make some changes here. So I just realized I didn't talk about the statuses. So we need to actually change some statuses as we go through this thing. So let's go ahead and add another, let's add a data step here. And we'll say set what test status. And that'll be right here. We'll make that a requirement. And then we also want to add our status notes. So we'll do a data step here, status notes, and make that a requirement as well. And we'll hit apply. And I forgot to hit apply here. So we're going to do this again, make that required and apply. Yeah, if you don't hit the apply button, it is not going to save what you did. Now we need to do the same thing here for our LOA assigned. So we need to add a data step here for both of those status changes. So again, we'll make this a requirement and we'll hit save, and then we'll come back to components and then we'll add another data step here for the notes and hit that as a requirement and hit apply. And then I was thinking about this again, and I kind of feel like we need to have another stage entered here for approval, because we get from submitted to the assignment and we don't actually talk about the approval. So let's go ahead and call this an approval stage. And again, this will be an identify, and we'll hit apply. It's not essential that you use a category. You can actually leave this blank. So if you don't know what to select, you can just leave this blank. This comes in helpful for pipelines later on if you do pipeline type stuff, but it isn't really essential for the development process. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and just do our status and make that required. And it'll either be closed or it'll continue throughout the process of being approved. And it'll either be closed or put on hold. But if it's canceled or closed, essentially, we actually want this to do different things. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, we got to add our other data step here. And let's go ahead and make that the notes, make it required, and apply. And let's go ahead and add this condition between the approval and the assignment. So the approval, if it's in an approved status, it'll keep going here. So acquisition request status equals submitted, assigned, shouldn't be submitted at this point. Budget review, pending info, approved, ordered, received. Unfunded requirement could go forward, but most of the time it kind of ends there. But on hold, it pretty much could keep going forward. So we don't want it to go forward if it's closed, admin canceled, unfunded, or canceled by the requester. Let's go ahead and apply that and change our name. Approved status and hit apply. So it's a little bit clearer what's going on there. All right, let's go ahead and save. And then it's going to create a connection here. It's not creating a connection to what we needed to, but it's creating a connection. All right, so after saving, it's going to add this line in here. Now, in my case, it wasn't actually set up this way. All I did was I dragged all of these previously designed ones over here, and then it normally creates a new one, so I just deleted that out of there. And that's all I did was I just dragged the ones we'd already created over, and then I deleted the one that it created because we'd already done that work. So no sense in using what was already there and deleting what we already have. But now effectively what happens is if the status is this, it's going to close. It's going to go straight to the very last step here and it'll be closed out. If the status is an approved status, it'll continue down our workflow. And that's the most likely outcome, is that it's going to kind of continue down this process here. Otherwise, it'll just kind of skip to the end and it'll be the closing step for it. Now, after the budget review for the processing steps, we actually need information from this step. So what I did is I added the purchase type and the request type back into this so that we could process this at this point. Now I could also just redo the entire flow from the beginning here and start with a condition based off of whether it's a contract or if it's a request type of shipping and that kind of stuff, but we can handle it over here also. Again, you can do these in a couple different ways. Now the user in this step is going to see additional information that they don't have to change, and I didn't make them required fields, so they don't have to change anything. It'll just kind of be there for them to see, and that makes it available for us to use inside of a condition. So if we put this condition in here, right here, now we'll have options. So we can go to our purchase type and select this. And what we're looking for is the contract. So if it's contract, it'll go forward along this route. And let's go ahead and hit apply here. And let's go ahead and save. All right, so now we got rid of that error. Let's scroll over. And let's just go ahead and rename this. So we'll say purchase type and apply. Now, if it's yes, then we're going to do contract processing. If it's no, then we're going to do the purchase card. So let's go ahead and add another component, and we're going to do another check here, which is a lot. We're doing a lot of different checks here. Now, this one is going to check on the request type. And what we're looking for is whether it's shipping. And if it's shipping, then we want to handle it a specific way. So let's go ahead and hit add. And let's go ahead and say request type and hit apply. And then we'll save. All right, so here's contract. So if it's a contract, what we're looking for is contract status. And again, we're looking at contract status. We're just going to identify, so we'll hit apply. And then for our details here, all we're looking for is them to set the status based off of the contract. And we'll say this is required, and we'll hit apply. And then we'll add another step. And this again will be our justification notes here, and required. Now, we could add more requirements for what happens with the contract specifically. Maybe there's other steps, and I'm sure there is actually quite a few other steps that are necessary for contracts, but we're not going to cover that as part of this. Again, we're trying to keep things a little bit basic. Now, from there, they set the status, and there might not be another step that happens after that, but first let's work on this request type. So we said if it's shipping, what do we need to do? So this would be our shipping status. Because remember, in this case, it's shipped, and so we could have a couple different status codes in there. So this might actually be shipping status shipped or something like that, or item shipped, or whatever stage makes sense for it. Again, we'll go with identify, we'll hit apply, and then we're going to add a step for our status. Make that required, apply, and then we'll go ahead and add another data step here. And again, this will be our notes, required, and apply. All right, let's go ahead and make this here. Now let's go ahead and add another stage right here. Now this is for, it's not shipping. So basically they have to order something. So we're going to have specific ordering statuses that people need to go here. And let's go ahead and ordering status. And again, it'll be identify, we'll hit apply, go to the components, modify this one first, status, required, apply, and then one more here. And again, the notes, required field, and apply. Now let's go ahead and look at this again. So first we're figuring out the purchase type. So if it's contract, it goes this route. If it's a purchase card, it goes this way. Purchase card, we're really worried about two categories, whether it was shipping something or whether we're buying something, and we're updating our status. Now again, we can add as many steps as we need to. We can come over here and we can add another stage, and we can make these things as long as necessary. But in this case, we're not trying to overcomplicate it more than it already is. But we don't need this because after each of these, we're closed. But we've essentially got our 3 possible options here. So let's go ahead and delete this one. Hit OK. And let's go ahead over here. Now for our closed, we have to go through and update our data step. And again, this is just status. So we'll make it a required field, hit apply, and then we're going to go ahead and add another data step for our notes and make that required and apply. All right, let's go ahead and save. And now the true test. Let's validate and see what errors we get. And validation was successful, so we can go ahead and activate. And let's go ahead and activate this. Now you might get these wait warnings here. It can take a little bit of time to do these. It's just like doing your business rules. This part of the system can take a while for it to actually play out and set everything up. So this could take anywhere from 5 to, I've seen it take as long as 15 minutes to complete out of there. If it takes that long, you could probably just refresh your screen and it's probably already done. But a lot of times I try to wait for it to actually finish out. All right, that only took about another 2 minutes and you can see it is active. So now we can go back to our application. All right, now back in our app, let's go ahead and create a new request and we can see that our flow is up here. Now again, our flow is going to adjust at each one of these stages as it goes through the process. So for example, if we get to here or wherever we put the conditions and it's a purchase type of contract, it's going to adjust our flow to show contract relevant items. And if we go back to our requests here, let's go ahead and select this one. You'll notice for anything that's already in here, it's not going to be activated. All you have to do is come up here to process, switch process, and then you select your flow here and hit OK. And then it'll actually trigger this and you'll see that the first step is already completed. Now to click on this one and we can complete it out of here. Again, we can add those notes. And if we come over here, we can see these extra fields that we added in here are pre-populated for them. So again, that's how you would put a business process flow in. Now I mentioned we could have readjusted things so that maybe some of the checks are a little over here and then all that conditional stuff starts happening right from the beginning. And then each one of those stages would have an approval in there. So that might be a good adjustment. I might do that later after this video is done, is actually make that adjustment in here, or at least test it out and see if I like that better. But that's how you do business process flows as part of the model-driven app. I wasn't originally planning on incorporating this in here, so I didn't really have this kind of planned out, and that's why we may have to adjust some things in here, but I thought it was important to cover this as part of this video because I know a lot of people like to do business process flows in their model-driven apps. Whenever you're building these, I usually recommend doing some sort of a wire diagram so you can kind of map things out on how you want the process to go. And then usually it's a little bit easier and a little bit smoother to build it. But I think this gets the point across on how you could set one of these up. Now that's it for today's video. Hopefully you found the content helpful. It's a pretty comprehensive and full-featured video. Again, in the description, I do put a link in there that you can put a tip if you found the content helpful or if it helped you with something. I mean, we give tips for pretty much everything these days. Now, your YouTube people, we don't make a lot of money on these videos, and right now I'm not even monetized, so I don't make anything off of this. So if you want to help fund the channel because you like the content and you think it's helpful, you might want to consider putting a tip just to kind of help the channel out. And as always, don't forget to hit that subscribe and that like button. It helps the YouTube algorithm get this information to other people that might find it helpful. Until next time.